All right, welcome back. Today we are diving headfirst into some of history's most extreme, most calculated, and just most brutal stories of revenge. We're not talking about simply getting even here. No, these are sagas of total, absolute annihilation.
Just think about it for a second. What is the absolute limit? Because today, we're going to look at some historical figures who didn't just cross the line. They set it on fire, salted the earth, and then completely rewrote the map. Okay, let's get right into our first story.
So we're starting way back in the 10th century with a woman named Olga of Kiev. Now, believe it or not, she would later be made a saint, but not before she orchestrated one of the most terrifyingly creative revenge plots you've ever heard of. And it was all because of what happened to her husband, Prince Igor.
So the backstory here is actually pretty simple. Igor was demanding way too much tribute money. He got greedy, he went back for a second helping, and the Drevlians decided to make an example of him in, well, the most gruesome way you can possibly imagine. This act of brutality was meant to send a message, but they had absolutely no idea who they had just provoked.
You see, Olga's response wasn't just a single angry outburst. Oh no. It was a cold, calculated four-part symphony of destruction. Each and every step was designed not just to wipe out the people who wronged her, but to cement her own power as the ruler for her young son. So the Drevlian prince, having just murdered her husband, had the unbelievable nerve to propose marriage to Olga. He sends his 20 best guys to deliver the offer. Olga, playing along, pretends to agree. She tells them they'll be shown great honor by being carried into the city in their own boat. What they didn't know was that they were being carried directly to a freshly dug trench and their own grave.
The Drevlians, completely clueless about what happened to the first group, then send their most powerful nobles to come get Olga. She invites them all to clean up in a bathhouse after their long journey, and once they were all inside, her soldiers bolted the doors and set the entire building on fire. Part 2. Complete.
Now for her third act, Olga travels to the Drevlian capital for what she said was a funeral feast for Igor. She tells them all to drink up, get good and drunk in his memory. And they did. Her soldiers, though, they stayed completely sober. The second the Drevlians were drunk and helpless, Olga gave the signal and her men moved in and slaughtered an estimated 5,000 of them. After that massacre, Olga put their capital city under siege. But after a year, she offered them a deal that sounded, frankly, too good to be true. She acted like she was forgiving them, asking only for a tiny, bizarre tribute. 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from every single house. The people in the city were exhausted, desperate for peace, so they quickly agreed. And this is where you see her diabolical genius. That night, her soldiers tied a small bundle of burning sulfur to each bird's leg and let them go. Of course, the birds flew straight back to their nests in the wooden houses and thatched roofs of the city, turning the entire capital into one massive, inescapable inferno. Olga's revenge was now total. Okay, let's jump forward in time for a story of swift, almost arrogant payback. This one features a 25-year-old Julius Caesar, long before he was the Julius Caesar. And really, this isn't just a story about revenge, it's a masterclass in psychological warfare. So get this, in 75 BCE, Caesar gets captured by pirates. But instead of being afraid, he's actually insulted. When they tell him his ransom is 20 talents of silver, he scoffs at them and demands they raise it to 50, basically saying he was worth way more. For 38 days, he didn't act like their captive. He acted like their boss, forcing them to listen to his speeches and casually joking that as soon as he was free, he'd come back and crucify every last one of them. The key here is just how fast this all happened. The moment his ransom was paid and he was set free, Caesar didn't go home and relax. Nope, he immediately raised a small naval force, sailed right back to the pirates' hideout, and captured the entire crew, taking his 50 talents back in the process.
And, well, he was a man of his word. Caesar had every single pirate crucified. But apparently, maybe he'd grown a little fond of them during his captivity, because he showed them a tiny bit of kindness by having their throats slit before they were put on the crosses, just to spare them a long, agonizing death. What a guy.
Caesar's revenge was quick, decisive, personal. But what happens when payback isn't immediate? What happens when it has to simmer for years, fueled not by ego, but by an unwavering code of honor? Our next story is all about that. This brings us to one of Japan's most famous and celebrated legends, the story of the 47 Ronin. It's an incredible tale of absolute loyalty, unbelievable discipline, and a revenge plot that had to be absolutely perfect. So it all started with an insult. A high-ranking court official named Kira basically goaded a young lord, Asano, until Asano just snapped and drew his weapon inside Edo Castle, which was a huge no-no, a capital offense. For this, Asano was forced to commit seppuku, or ritual suicide. His lands were taken, and his samurai became masterless ronin. And Kira, the guy who started the whole thing, he faced zero punishment.
What happened next is a true masterclass in patience. Kira fully expected revenge, so he had Asano's loyal samurai followed. So for 2 whole years, these ronin put on the performance of a lifetime. They scattered, took up boring jobs, and their leader, Oishi, even pretended to become a hopeless drunk. All of it just to convince Kira that he was safe. It was this long, humiliating wait, all designed to make their enemy completely drop his guard.
And then, on a snowy night in January 1703, the plan finally came together. The 47 Ronin regrouped and launched a perfectly timed assault on Kira's mansion. They cut down all his guards, and after a pretty frantic search, they found the cowardly official cowering in a storage shed.
They actually offered Kira the chance to die with honor, using the same dagger their master had used. He refused, so they beheaded him. With their mission complete, all 47 Ronin marched to their master's grave, presented Kira's head as an offering, and then just calmly turned themselves over to the authorities, fully accepting their own death sentences.
Okay, for our last story, let's see how revenge can scale up from personal honor to something so vast it wipes an entire empire right off the face of the earth. This, my friends, is history's greatest example of mess around and find out. So, in 1218, Genghis Khan wanted to set up some trade with the neighboring Khwarezmian Empire, but the local governor decided to execute his merchants and just take their stuff. Khan, trying to be diplomatic, sent some envoys to the Shah himself to sort it out. In response, the Shah kills one of the diplomats and, this is crucial, shaves the beards off the other 2. In Mongol culture, that was a massive, deliberate insult.
Khan's response was absolute. There would be no more talking, no more negotiations. He raised an army of 200,000 battle-hardened Mongol warriors with one single goal: to completely and utterly crush the Khwarezmian Empire.
And the punishment was systematic. The city that had bought the stolen goods, it was razed, its people massacred. The governor, Inalchuk, the guy who started it all, was captured. And as a kind of poetic punishment for his greed, the Mongols poured molten silver into his eyes and ears. The rest of the empire, it simply ceased to exist. The sheer scale of this is just staggering. This wasn't a war, it was an extermination. Historians estimate the death toll from this campaign of vengeance reached as high as 15 million people. An entire civilization was erased from history over a diplomatic insult. So from a grieving widow's fiery birds to a conqueror's world-altering fury, these stories push the very boundaries of what retribution means. And it leaves us with one final thought, right? Where is that line between justice and revenge? And when does the pursuit of payback end up consuming everything, including the victor? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.